Hello, hello, hello. Greetings to everyone. Palestine and Israel are at war, but what we want to examine today, what has been the Pan-African position regarding the Palestinian question. And this is very important to us as Africans because we have to understand what role we have to play. Unlike in the 1884s and 1885s, when Africa was invaded and we were not aware of what was coming before us as Africans, today is not the time for Africa to stay and keep quiet and not play a role when it comes to international affairs. Therefore, it is important for Africa to play a very important role in what is going on in the world. So this means that as Africans, regardless of the position of what is going on across the world, we have to pay close attention and we have to do our part. So for today, we want to look at what is this issue of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And one of the things we are going to look at is the brief history of the Palestinian and Israel conflict. We will look at questions like Pan-Africanism. What did people like Nkrumah say about the Palestinian and Israel question? And of course, we will come to today and look at the African Union itself. What is the position of the African Union when it comes to the question of the Israel and Palestine issue? So without wasting time, let me get to it. So in brief, the Israelites, they existed and lived in the Middle East during when the empires reigned. There's a couple of empires which reigned in the Middle East. You can talk of the Roman Empire. You can talk of the Ottoman Empire. All these empires, including the British Empire, came and controlled the Middle East at one point or another. So this period, during this control over the Middle East, these countries controlled the so-called Jews or Hebrews who lived in this area. But due to the brutality by some of these empires, the Hebrews left this place and went to Europe. And we are not sure how it is possible that all of them left the place. So when they left the place, the Arabs inhabited the place for a very long time. They inhabited the place for a very long time. Now, these Jews, they mixed among the European people. And when they mixed among the European people, this left the place empty and for them to, for the place to be occupied by the Palestinians and the Arabs. And this became a place for them. This became their place. Now come to the 1940s, when Hitler started persecuting the Jews, and of course, when they were being persecuted all over Europe, the Jews reached a certain point whereby they were so disgruntled by how they were being treated in Europe. For this matter, the Jews decided to start looking for a place to stay. And this was raised even to the British in the 1940s. The British, who at a certain point suggested that the Jews, at one time they suggested the Jews should be, allocated a place in Africa, and specifically around East Africa in Uganda and Kenya. If you look at the documents, they had suggested that the Jews should be allocated a place to stay in East Africa. Now, later on, it would be agreed that they would be relocated into the Middle East. And by the time the Jews started going to the Middle East to reclaim the land, the Palestinians were existent in this place, and that place was not called Israel. The place was called Palestine, as far as we are concerned. And we have also something to look at when it comes to the place, how it looks like when the Palestinians occupied this place. So I'll pull up a piece here for us to look at how the place looked before Israel came back to the place. Now, this is how the place looked like before the Jews came back to the place. The Palestinians were occupying the place, as you can see in the green part of it. This is how much in 1946 the Palestinians occupied the place. The Jews started occupying, as you are seeing in white here, starting in 1946, because they started coming back slowly into the place. Now, the UN sat in 1947 and agreed to allocate a place for the Palestinians. And as you are seeing in stage 2, this in white is where the Jews were allocated and the Palestinians were also given their place. So it was agreed that there would be a two-state solution to the Palestinian question. I mean, to the Jews' question and their desire to have a place to stay. So, what happened next? By 1949 to 1967, Israel had started being a little bit more aggressive in occupying the Palestinian land, even the land which was allocated to the Palestinians. And this created a lot of resentment among the Palestinians. And as we are seeing, by 2008, this is how much had remained of the land of the Palestinians. Now, this has gone on and continued to create a lot of resentment because of the way Israel has been behaving in the area. Even though the Palestinians had agreed to recognize Israel alongside them, Israel has instead continued to want to claim the whole land and possibly annihilate or genocide the Palestinians and remove them from the place. So this is what has created the resentment and the anger which we are seeing that is happening today. Now, I will try to be as much as fair to each side, like I mentioned from the start, that the Jews, it is possible that they were living from all the way before BC, that they were living around this place before these empires, like the British Empire and the Roman Empire, and when you talk about the Ottoman Empire, before they came in to, colonize them. Now, when we look at what happened later when Africa, for example, got independence, because Africa got its independence in the 1960s, what was the position of our forefathers when you are talking about Pan-Africanism, on the side of Pan-Africanism? What did our forefathers say when it came to the Jewish question? And of course, with this, we will consult Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. We will go ahead and consult Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and see what was his position on the Jewish question. What was Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's position on the Jewish question? And of course, like I said, we want to look at the history of this Palestine conflict, but majorly we want to focus on the position of Pan-Africanism. What is the position of Pan-Africanism when it comes to the Jewish and the Palestinian question and this conflict? Because we have heard many people say that Pan-Africanists should forget about what is happening in Palestine and they should get out. They should not play a part. But this is not the right way to look at things. Like we said, today the world is a global village. So Africa, unlike in the past, whereby we fell victim because we did not know what was going on in the world, in this era, there's no way you can say Africa should not get involved in the Palestinian and Jewish issue or the Israel issue, because we are part of this global village. The world has been compressed into a very small place. So there's no way right now we can say that Africa should avoid being part of this global village and participating in the various, issues that are happening on the global stage. And that is why we see that even President Ramaphosa led a delegation which went to try to intervene in the Ukraine issue when this war, intensified. They decided that Africa also should play a part. African Union, under the leadership, the delegation which was led by President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, decided that we will go and make a contribution as Africans. And simply because of the reason which I mentioned, that we are in a global village today. So Africa cannot, afford to stay on the side when events are going on across the world. When a lot of things are going on across the world and not participate, it would be a recipe for disaster. And that would show that we do not aspire to anything bigger than our tribes as Africans. And that is why it is very important for us to play a major role in this, Palestinian and Israel issue or the conflict that is going on. Now, let us go to Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and look at Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and his position, for example. We look at Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the reason being because Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was the utmost, strategist, or he's someone who molded Africa's position all the way from 1947, or we can talk of 1957 when Ghana got its independence. Most of Africa's foreign policy was molded by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Now, in understanding Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's position on the Palestine and Israel question, we will go to a book. We will look at a book called The Political and Social Thought of Kwame Nkrumah. Now, this book was written by a lady called Ama Baini. Ama Baini took, is a Ghanaian who lives in Britain. Ama Baini took time to write about Nkrumah in this particular situation, and in this writing, she dedicated some some part in the chapter on Nkrumah's foreign policy, on how Nkrumah dealt with Israel, for example. So she says that during Ghana's period of ascendancy after independence, after Ghana ascended from colonialism and entered independence, Nkrumah was looking for countries which Ghana would cooperate with. And so this led him to go across the world to look for countries which would trade with Ghana. Of course, you can talk of the Soviet Union, you can talk of Eastern Europe. And so she's saying that in addition to such attempts to widen the economic cooperation with the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, another country that maintained a strong economic ties with Ghana was Israel. Now, I speak of Nkrumah again because Nkrumah was instrumental in shaping Africa's foreign policy, even though many people do not agree Nkrumah's position, how much it influenced the rest of the continent. We had different presidents of the continent who were approaching this issue of African unity or African liberation in different ways. But in all, we agree, and majority of the people at least agree, that Nkrumah was instrumental in shaping Africa's position on global affairs. Like, for example, the participation of Africa by, with the representation of Nkrumah in the non-aligned movement, which was in the Bandung Conference. Now, another country that maintained strong ties with Ghana was Israel. So a special relationship between Ghana and Israel lasted for 3 years, from 1957 to 1960. However, the economic ties between the two countries went back to the pre-independence period. Ghana and Israel started their cooperation around 1953, around the period of 1953. In 1953, Israel's exports to the Gold Coast, before it became Ghana officially, because we remember that during this period in 1953, Ghana was still called the Gold Coast. So Ghana's exports to the Gold Coast, Israel's exports to the Gold Coast before it became Ghana were around $6,000. $6,000 was equivalent to, $6,000 was equivalent to around $64,000 for today. Because in 1953, it was around $6,000. That was how much Israel was exporting to the Gold Coast before it became Ghana in 1953. If you change that money, with inflation adjustment, if you adjust for inflation, that money today is around $64,000. Now that is 1953 once again. And these goods which Israel had with the Gold Coast, they rose to $135,000 in 1957. That is immediately after Ghana had gotten its independence. Now, within this period of 4 years, the trade rose from $64,000, just $64,000, which was almost nothing. In a period of 4 years, it had risen to an equivalent of $1.4 million in today's money. Now, what Ahmad Baine is saying is that in 1958, the value of Israel's imports from Ghana in 1958, 1 year after independence, Ghana was exporting around $611,000, which is equivalent to today's money around $6.5 million. That is 1958. Now, I will not take you through all this. But Israel went on to cooperate with Ghana over a long period, that even Israel used to send some of its diplomats to Ghana. They went on and cooperated. And that relationship culminated to the point that in 1958, Israel loaned Kwame Nkrumah's government. As you can see here, Israel loaned Kwame Nkrumah's government an amount of $20 million in 1958, which is equivalent to $215 million today, in today's money. So that money was supposed to be paid back in a period of 4 years. Now, by the time it had reached 1960, Nkrumah was also sending certain groups of young people who were part of the young pioneers to study in Israel. Some, of course, were sent to the Soviet Union, because Nkrumah was trying to build a group of young patriots in the country. By 1964, the imports from Ghana for Israel had increased to $1 million, which is equivalent to $10 million. But then there's something which happened. There's something which happened later, after 1960, after 1958. Something happened later, that the trade between Ghana and Israel started declining. And the reason was, which is given, is that after 3 years, from 1958, in 1961, Nkrumah was pushing for the unification of Africa. Now, there was this group which was called the Casablanca group, which Nkrumah belonged to. If you people remember, the Casablanca and Monrovia group, which we are warring, the Casablanca group believed that we should unify Africa quickly, in urgency. So in 1961, the Casablanca group sat with Nkrumah, Mali, and of course, Morocco was part, Egypt was part. These were the radical people. And Guinea, of course, Guinea-Conakry. Now, when they sat, what they realized is that Israel was working in tandem with the Western world countries. So in this working with the Western countries, this brought friction, because these countries were looked at as colonialists. The countries we are talking about, we are looked at as colonialists. We are talking about the countries of the Western world. We are talking about the countries of Europe, and then the United States. They realized that Morocco, they realized that Israel was cooperating directly. Israel was cooperating directly with the Western world. And yet the Western world, we all know, that is only interested in the exploitation of African resources. And therefore, what we are seeing here is that Nkrumah's signing of the Casablanca Accord on the January of 7th, 1961, brought about a setback to the relationship between Ghana and Israel. Because the resolutions in Casablanca, which are called the Casablanca Accords, unanimously condemned Israel as an instrument in the service of imperialism and neocolonialism. And they said that Israel serves imperialism not only in the Middle East. These are not my words. They said that Israel was serving as an instrument of imperialism and neocolonialism, not only in the Middle East, but also in Africa and Asia. So consequently, Nkrumah began to loosen his ties between, the ties between Ghana and Israel. So, but trade, of course, continued to grow. Trade continued to grow to the point that by the time Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966, Ghana's trade with Israel had reached to almost $50 million in today's money, which was around $4.9 million in 1966. In today's money, it would be equivalent to around $50 million, all the way from 1953, when it was at 64,000. It was just $64,000. So Ahmad Baini's conclusion in her book, the Political and Social Thought of Kwame Nkrumah, she says on this matter of Israel that it is evident that Nkrumah's economic pragmatism remained alongside his commitment to the Casablanca Accords, in that he maintained the relationship with Israel, but Nkrumah was more committed to the issue of African liberation, and he did not want to have those tight cooperations with countries which were engaged in colonialism. So in summary, while Israel was economically important to Ghana's economy, Nkrumah had to reconcile with the Casablanca position that Israel was deemed to be an imperialistic country. Now, here we were looking at Nkrumah's position when it comes to the question of Israel, because what we are looking at today is that we wanted to inform ourselves what was Nkrumah's position, because Nkrumah is the father of Pan-Africanism on the African continent, of course, not in the diaspora, because Pan-Africanism, we know all of us that it started way back in the diaspora. Now, to judge where Nkrumah is on the question of Israel and Palestine, I think that one I will leave, I will leave it for you, the audience. But for me, as a follower of Nkrumah, it is clear that countries which move with the West, they are serving the interests of imperialism. Now we will go to the African Union. You remember that the African Union, I think it was in 2021, ejected Israel from the African Union after Moussa Faki had given Israel an observer status at the African Union. Now, what was the reason? What was the reason that Israel was ejected in 2021 during the 35th ordinary session of the African Union? And of course, the reason is simple. We have two very strong countries which are very much against colonial behavior, and one of them is Israel. One of them is South Africa, not Israel. We have countries which are very strongly opposed to the behavior which Israel is carrying out in Palestine or against the Palestinian people. And one of those countries is South Africa, which is led by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, the resistance by the ANC and South Africa to Israel's position is based on the fact that South Africa has gone through the same treatment by the European apartheid regimes, the regime which was lodged in South Africa itself and was dominating and brutalizing the African people. We know very well about the history of apartheid in South Africa. This apartheid, which Africa, all of it, which Africa, all of it participated in fighting against. All of Africa participated in fighting against this apartheid. And people like Nkrumah himself also, we saw that he participated in the struggle against apartheid. And Nkrumah was one of the first heads of state when Ghana gained its independence to struggle against apartheid. Now, this is the position of South Africa because of the way the Europeans treated the Africans in South Africa. Now, the other country which we did not mention is Algeria. So these two countries, they are likely to be the rumors have been going around that they are the two countries which led to the suspension of Israel from the African Union. These two countries, we are talking about Algeria and we are talking about South Africa. And this is 2023. Actually, this African Union suspension of Israel happened this very year during the African, I think it was the 36th ordinary session of the African Union heads of state, when the representative of Israel had taken a place at the African Union when the meeting was going on. But also, what we know is that Palestine has an official observer status at the African Union. And whenever the African Union ordinary session of the African heads of state happens, Palestine is given a place to speak. So the position of Africa has been the position of liberation. Algeria, which I mentioned also, it went through a brutal history of destruction and colonization and oppression by the West. So that is why Algeria also was very much opposed to Israel having an observer status at the African Union, because African Union is for freedom for everyone. And the position of the African Union and the OAU as we know it had been that the two-state solution in Israel should hold. Israel should be able to live side by side with the Palestine without a bias. And I think that this is the position which we all Pan-Africanists should hold regarding the question of Palestine and Israel. Now, this is my analysis on this question from a historical point of view. So it is up to you out there to decide what you think, should be Africa's position, of course. But you would do me well, the people who are watching, to like my video. I'm pleading with you, of course, and definitely to share it with others if you can, but of course to put down your thoughts also. What do you think about this particular situation? What do you think about this particular situation when it comes to the question of Israel? Yeah, I can see Sinovia, thank you so much. Thank you for being part of this. J-T-Pat, thank you so much for being part of this broadcast. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys for being part of this. Thank you for watching the channel. I really appreciate your support. Thank you very much. This has been my analysis for today. Until another time, I'll be coming back. Thank you so much and see you again.